Welcome, everybody. If you're here, I'm really happy that you've made it to our OSF for Institutions webinar. As folks trickle in for the next minute or so, I'll just repeat a couple of things. So apologies as you hear me say it once or twice. The entire webinar will be recorded and you'll be getting an email from us after the webinar with a bunch of stuff, links, ways to contact myself and some other Center for Open Science folks that I'll introduce you to on this call. So don't worry about taking notes, or if you're confused, don't worry about it either. If you want to set up a demo with me or somebody else from our product team, from the OSF product team, we can do that. Just reply to that email and we'll set up a time. We can spend 15 minutes chatting, we can spend an hour. This is just a webinar to kind of give you an introduction to OSF for Institutions and give you a sense of the scope of what OSF for Institutions can do and what you get with the OSF for Institutions membership. So for those of you coming in, I'm just reiterating that we will be sending you a follow-up email with a recording of this webinar with lots of links for you to dive deeper, as well as a way to contact myself and Gretchen Gigan, who's our amazing in-house librarian, metadata expert, wearer of many hats, and also runs our member services for OSF Institutions and some of our other products. So just flagging that you'll get a lot of the information I talk about today right after in your inbox. So I'm going to start off with just a couple housekeeping things. Here's our email addresses and our full name. So my name is Nadia Ortelt. I am the Strategic Partnerships Manager at the Center for Open Science. I'll be hosting a webinar today. Gretchen Gigan is also on the call today and will be helping to answer some questions in the chat. If you have any questions about anything that we're talking about or that I'm talking about as I'm speaking, just put them in the Q&A portion of the chat. That way we can keep track of whether or not we're answering them. And at the end, we'll have a couple minutes to answer questions and get to any of the ones that we didn't get to in real time as I'm speaking. Just also a really quick note on the intended audience for this webinar. I know there's a lot of us here today. We made sure to reach out to a lot of OSF users for this webinar today. So some of you might not be research support staff or librarians or research administrators or folks that support researchers in some way. You might be a researcher yourself. That's also totally fine. Although we do kind of try to cater the content of this particular webinar because it's about OSF institutions to folks who work in research support within kind of institutional libraries. But I think it can be really helpful too if you are a researcher to understand how the material, the files, the metadata, the outcomes that you put and publish on the OSF can be seen and engaged with by your librarians. So feel free to stay or feel free to jump off if you want to also. So while I'm talking, our amazing marketing maven, Teresa, who's helping run this webinar, is just going to drop a couple of Zoom questions, survey questions rather, into the Zoom. So feel free to answer those as I'm talking. These just help me understand, your familiarity level with the OSF. Are you very familiar with it? Do you use it often? Do you only log in a couple of times? As a collaborator, you're not really familiar with how it works. Do you have an OSF account? And also, we're talking about OSF institutions today. Are you familiar with it? Or do you not have any familiarity at all? There's no wrong answer. You're not getting tested. It's just a survey for us to understand who's here. And again, there's about 70 of you. So I expect to see kind of a wide range of experience. So I'm going to drop a couple links. Mostly you'll receive these afterwards, so you can click through. But if you want to follow along a little bit as we're talking, you can search on cos.io, which is the Center for Open Science's main web site. And you can find our product page where we talk about OSF institutions or a number of our other products, which I may touch upon today, but we're really just talking about the one OSF institutions. So before we talk about OSF institutions and what it can do for you as a person who might support researchers, the OSF as a software infrastructure platform is free. Anybody can use it. If you're one of the folks who just answered no to do you have an OSF account, you can start an OSF account as I'm chatting. It should take you only a couple of minutes. It's always going to be free for users, for researchers. The OSF does not have limits on the amount of material that you post or publish or create on the platform. There are storage caps that are constrained to projects, but you can publish as many projects or registrations or preprints on the platform as you'd like as an individual user. So I just want to preface everything else that I'll say by talking about the focus of individual users on the OSF means that individual users ultimately have a great degree of power over what material is public, what material is private, and what they put on the platform. And that's always going to be the focus of the OSF. There are three things that you can do on the OSF. We think of them as three workflows, three types of objects that you can publish on the OSF: projects, registrations, and preprints. So you'll hear me referring to content on the OSF. I'm always referring to projects, registrations, or preprints. So what are they? Projects are a really excellent place for a team to show their work, collaborate on work, refine ideas. If you think about research as a life cycle, the project space is a really flexible initial space for collaborators of any kind. It could be postdocs, you could be a PI, you could be a high school student. It's a really flexible place to work together. You can upload files, you can version files, you can track activity, you can add different components within a project that have different collaborators and different access. So I could add different people to different parts of a project because I only want them to have access to that part of the project. I can make those components of the project private or public. I can add really specific metadata to those components and to the project at the project level. You can add collaborators to a project, again, to components, but also at the top level. You can add them or remove them at any time. They can be from your institution. They can also be from another institution. They can be unaffiliated. And that makes the project space a really flexible and great tool for the early stages, or really any stage of research or collaboration. And once a project is public, you can also mint a DOI. Because the project space is so flexible in the OSF, what we end up seeing is different types of people, different types of users using the project format in a multitude of different ways that we didn't even plan on. So we have folks who use projects as a place to archive a conference or many years of a conference. We have undergraduate students who use projects to do their thesis and archive that thesis. We have folks that use projects just as private workspaces to collaborate and take notes and link storage alongside other users because they want a place to collate everything and have it all findable. And projects are really flexible. They allow you to really create the structure of the project in any way that you want, and share it at any point. Some people keep a project open from the start. Some people use it to create the work they want to share, and then at the end of the project they share the project and make it open and public. We have the capacity within a project to set really fine-grained permissions on all components of a project, including licensing, utilization, as I said, of metadata. And OSF has a very robust metadata schema that I invite any of you to kind of reach out and inquire a bit more about if you have questions. We also utilize persistent identifiers of all kinds, including ROR identifiers, and for projects and preprints and registrations, we also link those persistent identifiers with DataCite and Crossref. You can also log on to the OSF linking your ORCID ID as well. One of the powerful things about our enormous product and engineering team at the Center for Open Science, one of the cool things about having them here is that we're constantly working on upgrading our API so that if you do have the capacity, the engineering capacity or the coding capacity, you can utilize that API, work with us if you have questions about it, and we can propagate data or metadata from the OSF project or projects. So what are registrations on the OSF? So remember, there are these three types of things you can do on the OSF. Registrations are ways of timestamping something that you publish on the OSF and archiving them forever. So whereas a project can be deleted at any point, is very flexible, a registration is kind of the opposite of that. It's a time-stamped archived object. You can't delete it. You can delete components of it, but ultimately it's a indelible object. There are kind of subcategories of registrations, including pre-registration, which is commonly used in a lot of behavioral fields. And we like to think of registration as the sort of cutting edge of open scholarship tools, and we try to support that on the platform. One of the nice things about registrations is that if you're working in a project, you can create a registration from an existing OSF project. So that pulls all the metadata and the files from your parent project, and it puts it into a registration, which can be openly shared with the public or with your community. You can also create registrations from scratch, and we have a number of templates that can support registration. I would say it's increasingly common to use registration in certain research spaces, but if you haven't heard of it, that's also very common. I talk to a lot of different types of people from different disciplines and fields, and some are more familiar with the concept of research registration than others. A lot of other project management research tools don't have the capacity to support registrations in the way that OSF as a platform does, and that's just something to note, but that's a sort of differentiating factor between OSF and some other similar either generalist repositories or project management tools. So I'm not going to talk too much about preprints because my assumption is a lot of you probably know what a preprint is. It's a much more common object, a publishing object within different scholarship fields. On the OSF, it shares a lot of features with the project, but the sort of primary piece of a preprint on the OSF is a PDF file. You still have the capacity to utilize our metadata schema, and one of the important things to keep in mind with the preprint is that for OSF institutions, which I'm about to talk about now, preprints, registrations, and projects are all considered affiliated content for an institution, whether that institution is a university or a hospital network, or any kind of organization which utilizes single sign-on. So how does OSF Institutions work? Single sign-on authentication allows for all of the projects, registrations, and preprints that are affiliated with your institution to be automatically aggregated under what we call an institutional page. It also adds your ROR institutional identifier to the metadata that's associated with those projects and registrations and preprints. And that all gets shared downstream, as I said before, DataCite and ORCID, and it makes it easier for you to aggregate all of that material and find all of that material. So what this means in practice is that any user from your institution who uses your single sign-on, once you sign on as an institutional member, and membership is for an institution, it's not for an individual. But once you sign on with us, we help make sure that everybody at your institution is using single sign-on. And when they do that, any material that they publish on the platform that's public, again, a registration, a preprint, or a project, is auto-aggregated to the project page. One of the other really great things is not only do all of those published pieces of material on the platform appear on the landing page, so are searchable, findable, but institutional branding also appears on all of the associated or affiliated projects and registrations and preprints. So they do look a little bit different on those different objects, but they are all there. So anyone who's visiting those pages or projects or preprints then knows immediately that the research and researchers are officially affiliated with your institutions and verified because we're using single sign-on, which is different than somebody just saying they're affiliated with their institution in an unverified way. And researchers at your institution can use the same login credentials that they use, in this case here, at Case Western, to also log into the OSF. And so it makes it a lot easier for them to utilize the platform as a research tool, as a repository, as a collaboration tool, or as a publishing tool. One of the great things about OSF Institutions is that you get direct access to Gretchen Gigan and myself, and a lot of other members of our product team and of COS to help you and support you to make all of these materials, all of this access readily and easily available to researchers in your community that you already support. We have a ton of material that can help guide folks to utilize the platform. We also have training available that I'm happy to talk more about to you offline if you'd like. And we really help walk you through the whole process of onboarding your community, creating the kind of materials that will help them best use it. And also, as any kind of research support staff or as a librarian, helping you understand how you can best utilize this tool. One of the extremely powerful things about the OSF that our institutional members really love is the interoperability of the platform. So it can connect a lot of the tools that your institution already pays for, that you already pay for, and that community members already use. And so it can really simplify collaboration and access and storage in particular. So OSF can be integrated or linked to a lot of different storage and citation tools by user. So if I use Dropbox and you use Box at your different institutions, we can both link those to our accounts, and within a project, we can share storage across those different providers. So on one project page, we can have access to material that is stored in different locations, and utilize metadata to make that more findable and accessible. So it's a way to reduce a lot of redundancy and service costs by integrating a lot of different scholarly services in the same place. Just as an example of kind of what this looks like, this is an OSF project space. And here you can see we've enabled integrations with Box, GitHub, Google Drive, Zotero. So that means like in this project space, you can pull in files and references that are across those other tools into this one project with all the materials that are created or placed there. So at the moment, OSF can integrate with over 11 storage providers and a handful of citation managers. We're working on a much bigger project as well to make the addition of different types of integrated services easier. So that's something that's on our dedicated roadmap in the next year. There's also a number of products that have built OSF extensions that work in the other direction. So they can store and update OSF content from another application. And we have a lot of documentation in our help guides around that. Maybe while I keep chatting, Gretchen might be able to add some of those help guides to show you guys. And the open OSF API, as I talked about before, allows for the development of these types of integrations. And we're working to really make our documentation more robust and create more support processes around this to make it more usable. One thing that I won't dive too much into, but I can just show you guys a little bit is one use case of OSF Institutions. So this is the University of British Columbia, which is one of our OSF Institutions members. You can see here, I'll just make my screen a little larger. So this is the UBC institutions page. You can see here, you can search by projects, by registrations, by preprints, files, and users. You can refine your search. I'll just look here at registration. This is a registration from 2022. You can see here on the middle right, the UBC affiliated institution, and you'll see this kind of affiliation on projects, registrations, and preprints. I'll show you another project that has this UBC affiliation on it as well on the upper left-hand side. So this is a a researcher that's utilizing single sign-on from University of British Columbia to sign on. And because this is a public project, it has that public affiliation on the page. You can see the UBC page and data site comments. And again, we push all of the metadata and data from the OSF to DataSite. And let's see here. Yeah, and so this is an example of, this is a project, which is this a project? Yes, it's a project, not a registration that has been published. We minted this DOI, and you can also see it here. Oh, sorry, this is a pre-registration, not a project. It's on the OSF here. I'll send you through these links so you can click through them on your own too, just to see what it looks like for material to be published on the OSF from your institution when you are an institutional member. A couple other benefits that you get through institutional membership. And this is a really exciting time for you to be joining us on this webinar, and also for me to be kind of telling you a bit about some secret feature work that's happening behind the scenes. So at the moment, when you are an institutional member, and some of you here might already be research support staff or faculty from an institution that's already a member, so this is relevant to you. And we're also happy to, if you're here and you realize that you're a member, but you don't know who's your contact with COS or OSF, we're happy to put you in touch with those folks, so please reach out. But one of the things that you get as an institutional member is an administrative dashboard. So you have any number, there's no limit on the number of administrators you can have for OSF institutions, but let's say there are 2 or 3 of you, you would get access to this backend that would show you the number of single sign-on users that are connected from your institution, the total number of projects from your institution, how many are public and private, and if applicable, also which departments that material has come from, as well as the by user, the number of public and private projects. In addition, and that's what you see on the left there, in addition, you also get quarterly reports that are a deeper dive into total page views, more of a in-depth breakdown into the type of material that's published on the platform, as well as, if you'd like, the ability to chat with Gretchen Yigan on how your OSF membership is being utilized by users at your institution. And this is a really great opportunity to kind of problem solve, to think about maybe some new metrics that you might need or want that Gretchen can help you access. One of the things to note about this administrative dashboard is that what we're doing over the course of the next year is actually merging a lot of the in-depth data that we pull on a quarterly basis with the dashboard. So you'd be able to have a lot more in real time access to the data that ultimately at the moment comes in the quarterly reports. We're also working on a really big update to a user type, a data curation user type, which again is in process, which would allow you as a research administrator or support staff or librarian to engage with material on the platform, and in particular with metadata associated or affiliated with material on the platform by a user. This is something that a lot of our users have been asking for, and I just want to flag it because if it is something that is a feature that is kind of make or break for you in terms of becoming institutional members, I would love to hear from you. So please reach out to me, respond to that email we'll send you after the webinar, because I'd love to chat with you further and make sure that some of your needs around data curation for your institution are met by some of these updates we're making to the administrative dashboard. So please do reach out. I'll be sending through in the slides that we sent through to you guys some more resources, some examples of other institutions like Carnegie Mellon University, VU and Amsterdam, Harvard, different projects that they have, best practices, templates for projects, workshops, etc., that are great support resources. Also talk just a little bit about one of our kind of case studies in best open scholarship practices as it pertains to the use of OSF institutions. So Virginia Commonwealth University, who we ran a really fantastic webinar with earlier this year, really they've been working for many years to build up a base of use of the OSF by their researchers, and they actually found institutional support for something called the Data Science Lab. There's 2 full-time staff there, and they teach really oversubscribed data science courses for graduate students. They're trying to expand with more funding, but they always have a waiting list for their data science courses. And these onboard graduate students to the use of the OSF. They teach best practices for organizing, sharing data, for just research in general, as well as, institutional policies, VCU's policies, and other kind of funder policies that impact how they share research outcomes or share data, and how they utilize their own institutional repositories in and alongside the OSF. They also initially utilized some of OSF's, like our own training and workshops, but they've integrated that into their own OSF workshops, which is a mixture of like their own material that's specific to VCU and ours. And this is really great kind of example of how the OSF can be integrated into a lot of different suggested workflows for researchers. Again, alongside maybe some institutional repositories that may be used for sharing research and data. So just to kind of recap, what do you get with an institution's membership? You get help desk prioritization. So any of your users that come from your institution that email our help desk get prioritized. You also get a dedicated product owner and member services manager, who's Gretchen Gigan, who we've talked about, who's here on this call. She'll help you with a lot of training and onboarding materials, help you understand what your institution's metadata needs are for data curation. You'll also get an institutional dashboard at the $5,000 level of institutional membership. Again, this will be updated significantly by year end with advanced metrics and some data curation administrative roles as well. So just flagging. Again, if you're interested in that and have more questions about it, please reach out. I'm very happy to talk about it and what that means, both for existing member institutions, but also for new institutions if you're thinking of joining. And right now, again, before we make that update, you'll be getting in-depth metrics reports on OSF usage by your community. One thing I want to flag is that if you're on this call right now and you know or you don't know if any researchers at your institution are already using the OSF, I do know. So you can reach out to me and ask me how many people are using the OSF at my institution. And I can tell you public information about that. So I can say how many users there are who are utilizing, your domain at your institution, and I can and we can talk through that. What is that public? What do those public projects look like? What do those public registrations look like, et cetera? And that can be really helpful because once we talk about that and you see that, you would have an understanding of what would appear on your institutional page if you were to sign on as a member. It's just a kind of more visual kind of understanding of the difference between a free OSF account for a user and a paid membership. So there's always going to be unlimited workspaces and collaboration. One of the big things that you get is branded landing page, branded institutional affiliation on projects and registrations and preprints, as well as a lot of the customized training, onboarding material, and metrics reports and dashboards. Our pricing is extremely competitive given what you get for membership. So OSF Institutions starts at $2,500 a year. For a little bit more, for $5,000 a year, you get the metrics dashboard, the administrative access, and starting at the end of this year into next year, you'll also have access to those that advanced metrics dashboard that I discussed. So if you have any questions about that at all, please feel free to reach out. If you have any questions on anything that I mentioned today, also feel free to reach out. And if you're here and you don't have the capacity to sign on as an OSF institutional member because you are a researcher or of any kind, that's fine. Bring us to your library staff. Let me know if you know somebody who's an advocate for open scholarship tools at your institution, and we can all get on a call together or chat. If you are a user of the OSF, a power user, or you just really love the platform and you would love to tell your library staff about what we do, or any kind of research support staff, or how the platform works, please do that. We would love that, and let us know that you've done it. I think we have a couple of minutes for some questions. I see that there's a couple in here. Let's see. So yeah, this question that I know Gretchen is answering right now, you can keep doing that, Gretchen, but it's a good one for me to answer. OSF is for anybody. So we primarily built the platform for scholars, and not just social scientists or educators, for any kind of STEM researchers, humanities researchers, evaluators, really anybody who is publishing research. But as I said before, a lot of different people use the platform for different reasons. So we have a lot of users on the platform now who utilize projects in particular for a whole variety of reasons that and purposes that are not necessarily about scholarly publishing or scholarly collaborations. But the platform is flexible enough that really anyone can use it. As an example, we were just at the American Libraries Association conference. We talked to a lot of librarians at public libraries, and we talked about how the OSF can be a really powerful publishing tool, not just for scholars at academic institutions, but for anybody who's interested in publishing DIY citizen science in their community, or publishing resources, almost using it like a CMS for a local library. So really, you can use it for a lot of different things. I think we have maybe one. I think we have a couple questions in the webinar chat just quickly. The email address for myself, you'll get that in an email, but it's just my name, Nadia@cos.io. Is there an option for paid for project versus institution? You don't have to pay for projects. Projects are free as an individual user. What you get with an institutional account is the ability to aggregate all the material created by the entire research community. And that utilizes single sign-on. So you do have to have single sign-on at your institution to utilize OSF Institutions membership. Those are in USD prices, Christine, just to answer that question quickly. So that's $2,500 US a year starting price. And if you have any questions about pricing, please feel free again to reach out. And I'm going to stop sharing now. And I just want to thank everybody for attending. Please let me know if you want to know what kind of material is being published at your institution, how many users you might have that are already on the platform. I'm happy to tell you that. You'll get a follow-up email from me, and just reply, and we can set up a time to talk. Thank you, everybody, for attending.